All right, moving on to Mark 7. That which defiles. The Pharisees and some of the teachers of the law who had come from Jerusalem gathered around Jesus and saw some of his disciples eating food with his hands that were defiled, that is, unwashed. The Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they give their hands a ceremonial washing, holding to the tradition of the elders. When they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash. And they observe many other traditions, such as washing of cups, pitchers, and kettles. So the Pharisees and teachers of the law asked Jesus, "Why don't your disciples live according to the tradition of the elders, instead of eating their food with defiled hands?" He replied, "Isaiah was right when he prophesied about the hypocrites, as it is written, 'These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules.' You have let go of the commands of God and are holding on to human traditions." And he continued, "You have a fine way of setting aside the commands of God in order to observe your own traditions. For Moses said, 'Honor your father and mother,' and anyone who curses their father and mother is to be put to death. But you say that if anyone declares that what might have been used to help their father and mother is Corban, that is devoted to God, then you no longer let them do anything for their father and mother. Thus you nullify the word of God by your tradition that you have handed down, and you do so many things like that." And again, Jesus called the crowd to him and said, "Listen to me, everyone, and understand this. Nothing outside a person can defile them by going into them. Rather, it is what comes out of a person that defiles them." After he had left the crowd and entered the house, his disciples asked him about the parable. "Are you so dull?" he asked. "Don't you see that nothing that enters a person from the outside can defile them? For it doesn't go into their heart, but into their stomach, and then out of their body." In saying this, Jesus declared all foods clean. He went on, "What comes out of a person is what defiles them. For it is within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts come: sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All these evils come from inside and defile a person." Jesus honors a Syrophoenician woman's faith. Jesus left that place and went to the vicinity of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it. Yet he could not keep his presence secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an impure spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman, as Greek, born in Syrian Phoenicia, she begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. "First let the children eat all they want," he told her, "for it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." "Lord," she replied, "even the dogs under the table eat this children's crumbs." Then he told her, "For such a reply, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." She went home and found her child lying on the bed and the demon gone. Jesus heals a deaf and a mute man. Then Jesus left the vicinity of Tyre and went through Sidon, down to the Sea of Galilee, and into the region of Decapolis. There some people brought to him a man who was deaf and could hardly talk, and they begged Jesus to place his hand on him. After he took him aside away from the crowd, Jesus put his fingers into the man's ear. Then he spit and touched the man's tongue. He looked up to heaven and with a deep sigh said to him, "Ephphatha," which means "be opened." At this the man's ears were opened, his tongue was loosened, and he began to speak plainly. Jesus commanded them not to tell anyone, but the more he did so, the more they kept talking about it. People were overwhelmed with amazement. "He has done everything well," they said. "He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. Mark 8. Jesus feeds the 4,000. During those days, another large crowd gathered. Since they had nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples to him and said, I have compassion for these people. They have already been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them home hungry, they will collapse on the way, because some of them have come a long distance. His disciples answered, But where is this remote place? Can anyone get enough bread to feed them? How many loaves do you have? Jesus asked. 7, they replied. He told the crowd to sit down on the ground. When he had taken the 7 loaves and given thanks, he broke them and gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people, and they did so. They had a few small fish as well. He gave thanks for them also, and told the disciples to distribute them. The people ate and were satisfied. After the disciples picked up 7 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over, about 4,000 were present. After he had sent them away, he got into a boat with his disciples and went to the region of Dalmanutha. The Pharisees came and began to question Jesus. To test him, they asked him for a sign from heaven. He sighed deeply and asked, Why does this generation ask for a sign? Truly, I tell you, no sign will be given to it. Then he left them, got back into the boat, and crossed to the other side. The yeast of the Pharisees and Herod. The disciples had forgotten to bring bread, except for 1 loaf they had with them in the boat. Be careful, Jesus warned them. Watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees and that of Herod. They discussed this with one another and said, It is because we have no bread. Aware of their discussion, Jesus asked him, Why are you talking about having no bread? Do you still not see or understand? Are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes but fail to see and ears but fail to hear? And don't you remember when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000? How many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up? 12, they replied. And when I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000, how many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up? They answered, 7. He said to them, Do you still not understand? Jesus heals a blind man in Bethsaida. They came to Bethsaida, and some people brought a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. He took the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village. When he had spit on the man's eyes and put his hands on him, Jesus asked, Do you see anything? He looked up and said, I see people. They look like trees walking around. Once more, Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes. Then his eyes were opened. His sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. Jesus sent him home, saying, Don't even go into the village. Peter declares that Jesus is the Messiah. Jesus and his disciples went on to the villages around Caesarea Philippi. On the way, he asked them, Who do people say I am? They replied, Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others, one of the prophets. But what about you? He asked. Who do you say I am? Peter answered, You are the Messiah. Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. Jesus predicts his death. He then began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and after 3 days rise again. He spoke plainly about this, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But when Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter. Get behind me, Satan, he said. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. The way of the cross. Then he called the crowd to him along with his disciples and said, Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels. The big picture of Mark 7 to 8 is we go from external religion to heart revelation. Mark 7 to 8 is the hinge of the gospel. But up to this point, Jesus' authority has been revealed, resisted, and demonstrated. Here, the question becomes unavoidable. Is the problem outside of us or within us? And just as importantly, what do we say Jesus is when following him no longer feels triumphant? These chapters move discipleship from amazement to confrontation and from power to identity. Let's break it down. So Mark 7, 1 to 13 gives us tradition versus truth. Religious leaders challenge Jesus over ritual purity. Jesus responds by exposing a dangerous trait. Tradition replacing obedience. The issue is not honoring tradition. It is using tradition to avoid surrender. Jesus makes it clear external conformity cannot heal internal rebellion. And as we move on to Mark 7, 14 to 23, this answers what truly defiles a person. Jesus shifts the focus inward. So defilement does not come from what enters the body, but what flows out of the heart. This is a radical reorientation. Sin is not primarily environmental, it's internal. God's kingdom requires heart transformation first and foremost, not just behavioral management, as in the 613 commandments of the Old Testament as the law of Moses. Mark 7 to 24 to 30 shows faith beyond boundaries. A Gentile woman approaches Jesus with bold, persistent faith. She has no covenant claim, only trust in him. And Jesus reveals that faith, not lineage. It grants access to the kingdom. We've seen this message played out by Jesus multiple times by now. Mark 7 to 31 to 37, Jesus shows healing that restores wholeness. So Jesus heals a deaf man using personal, intimate gestures, right? Focuses on his eyes, focuses on his ears, in steps and stages. The miracle is not rushed or publicized. He reveals that he restores not just the function, but the dignity. He knows we are broken by the world, and God will heal each of us in our own way, in steps that our heart can handle. And now, seeing without understanding in Mark 8, 1 to 10, we go into Jesus feeding another crowd. He's doing more than just teaching, he's fulfilling. He's leading the people to a personal relationship. The miracle echoes earlier provision. Yet the disciples still struggle to see and trust. Experience does not automatically produce faith. So powerfully, in Mark 8, 11 to 13, Jesus is demanded for a sign, but he denies. Religious leaders ask for proof, but here Jesus again refuses. And it is so powerful. Sighing deeply in his spirit, he said, "Why does this generation seek for a sign? Truly I say to you, no sign shall be given to this generation." Faith that demands control cannot recognize revelation. We see this same instance in our lives. Faith is truly the blind belief of knowing. Evidence removes the power of trust, belief, and faith. 8:14 to 21 shines light on the yeast of the Pharisees. Jesus warns against subtle corruption, pointing to not only Rome, but his very own people. The disciples misunderstanding his message, and the memory here, without understanding, leads to blindness. In Mark 8:22-26, these are the healing in stages. Jesus heals that blind man in 2 stages. This is intentional because it mirrors the disciples' partial sight. They see, but not clearly. Discipleship is often progressive before it is complete. Just like a parable. We see it, we hear it, but sometimes we have to experience it to then truly understand it. Who do you say I am? In Mark 8:27-30, Jesus brings the disciples to Caesarea Philippi, a place saturated with false gods. The question for them is direct. Who do you say that I am? And here, of all the answers, then Peter finally answers correctly, but incompletely. You are the Messiah. And recognition precedes the understanding. And we get to Mark 8:31-33 is the costly clarification. Here, Jesus redefines messiahship. We learn that his victory will come through suffering. Peter resists at this point, and we're left knowing that a Messiah without a cross is no Messiah at all. You must take up his cross and follow him. In Mark 8:34-38, we start to see the cost of following. And Jesus speaks plainly. Deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. Discipleship is not self-enhancement. It is self-surrender. The kingdom is gained only by losing what cannot last, surrendering your body and your life here for your life in heaven. Here are some reflection questions. Where might tradition or habit be substituting for obedience in your life? What heart issues tend to surface under pressure or stress? How does gradual spiritual sight encourage patience in your walk? Who do you say Jesus is? And how does your life support that confession? And what does taking up your cross look like in your current season? Mark 7-8 brings the journey to a turning point. The question is no longer about Jesus' power. It's about his identity and our surrender. From here on, the road leads unmistakably toward the cross. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in Mark 9-10. God bless.